All right. Hello. Good evening from Hong Kong, or indeed good morning if you're in Indianapolis. And thank you for joining us on this One Shot Saturday Presents live stream all about how to host a drop-in RPG meetup. My name's Tom. I'm one of the founder members of the group. And just to give you a little intro to who we are and what we'll be talking about today. One Shot Saturday is, as the name implies, a weekly meetup that runs one-shot role-playing games. We've been doing that for about 5 or 6 years now, and we have done okay. It's run consistently with a bit of a shift to online during the pandemic, but generally has done pretty well, introduced a lot of new players to role-playing games, and reacquainted some veterans with RPGs as well, and generally formed a pretty good community. So what we're going to do in this panel is talk about our experiences, the things that we do, also why we do them, some of the things we tried that didn't work out, and some of the problems that we have encountered in organizing this kind of low commitment, very open, very friendly, we hope, event. And hopefully you'll be able to take some or all of what we've learned over those past years and apply it to your game organization as well. There are three. I'm going to quickly run through what we're going to talk about so you know what to expect. There are sort of three areas we'll be discussing. There's the broader thing that we're calling kind of before the meetup. That's about, selecting a venue, how you decide which games you're going to play, how you communicate with existing members of your group and potential ones. And then we have at the meetup as well. So that's things like how we decide who's doing which game, especially now we have table number restrictions, and things like how to welcome new players or people who are nervous and people who have just different requirements for their game experience, and how we make that as friendly and universal as possible. You can leave comments as we go along while we're watching. So if you would like to do that, just drop it in the comments. We can, if you have any questions, for example, if you want more details about something, we should see that, but it's not instantaneous. So don't try and do comedy timing. Otherwise, it should be fine. Just going to check my running order, and let me see. It is time to bring on, introduce the first member of the panel that isn't me, and that will be Bernard.
Hello, Tom. Thank you for having
Bernard.
me.
How are you
Hi,
doing?
all. I'm fine, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm all right. So great to talk to you in an online environment as opposed to seeing you in a cafe on a Saturday. Why don't you tell people a bit about your background in gaming terms, maybe, or like how you found the group, how long you've been playing One Shot Saturday, something like that.
Sure, Tom. So, hi, everyone. This is Bernard here. So, it's around 3.5 years ago already. Time flies. So, I've been searching for different meetup groups for fun, how to spend my leisure time. And I happened to see a group about storytelling, RPG. Sounds fun, something that I never tried before, and it looks like a pretty friendly group. So one Saturday, I just went to the cafe. They said they will be in, drop in, and now here I am.
All right, fantastic. Well, I'm glad you mentioned the friendliness. I think we'll come back to that a bit later on in our discussion. But before we do that, let's bring on our next panelist, which is Jay. Let's get him on screen. Hi, Jay.
Hello.
Hi, Jay. Now, you are a founder member of this group. Would you like to explain something of your background and that kind of thing?
Well, I've been playing role-playing games since I was about 22 or so many a year now. I've got several very long-running games that migrated onto email and all the rest of it. But so One Shot Saturday came about through us just meeting up, I suppose, and just originating from there. So yeah, I've been founder member, regular GM, almost a forever GM on some occasions.
Yes, that's a thing. Maybe we could talk about that a bit later as well.
Oh, yes.
But yeah, of course, we first started out because I was looking for people to help playtest The Warren by Marshall Miller, the rabbit game, and it was you and me and Stuart Chaplin, who's no longer in Hong Kong. And for a while, we were just a gaming group with a Google Plus page, but we gradually turned into something good, which is something we should also talk about a bit more, I guess. But before we do that, last but by no means least, let's add our fourth panel member, which is Kat. If I can get it. There she is. Has she frozen? Kat, hello. Little laggy.
Nope.
Hey, Kat.
Kat. I am going to boot Kat temporarily, I think, and we'll see if we can get her back in. Okay. Somebody drop a note to her to log out and log back in again, if you could. Let me see. So that's how we prove that it's definitely a live stream and not pre-recorded anyway. So yeah, well, okay, let's talk a little bit about the origins of One Shot Saturday, actually. Jay, if we want to get into that. Because we did sort of... Oh, go on, sorry.
The core of it, as Tom mentioned, was that was it Marshall Miller, or writer, the Warren, was looking for playtesters. Yeah. A group of us all said, yeah, we'll playtest that. And we were trying to arrange a good time when it would be online for us to have a look at it, and then discovered that we were all actually already in Hong Kong.
That's right. Yeah.
So it very easily became, well, let's just meet up in public. We had a little bit of an awkward start because you were originally going to play on the roof of the garden section of the International Finance Center.
That's right. We were going to do the outdoor restaurant tables. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and we immediately discovered that that particular location is windy.
Yes.
Because of the shape of the buildings. So we didn't even bother getting our pieces of paper out. We just went downstairs to our original venue, Panino Gusto, in the International Finance Center Mall, which was fine when it was just the three of us, with the occasional fourth coming along, if you don't mind paninis, because that's the only thing they sell.
Only thing you could buy there. That's right.
Yeah. And from there, we just kind of trickled along for a very long time. I think the first half of our time when we were Indie Saturday rather than One Shot Saturday or Indie Meetup, it was mostly me, you, Stuart, and the occasional others for a while. We had a lot of people come and go.
We did. So I'm just going to try and add Kat back in, if I can interrupt you briefly. Kat, hello. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Hello.
There we go. Oh, no.
Okay, that's great. Yes, Kat. So yeah, the video is slightly laggy, but the audio seems okay, so that's all right. Yeah, we were just talking about, actually, I'd like to bring you in on this, Kat, and you can do your self-intro there, which is, we did rebrand from Indie Saturday to One Shot Saturday, I think basically after someone had run D&D 5e like 3 times, and like you can't call yourself an indie meetup after that. Rubicon has been crossed. But I think making it One Shot Saturday, I think maybe tip number 1 is make it very clear what your event is about, and like what the format is, even if you can in the name of the meetup. But Kat, can you tell us a bit about your, how did you find us and how did you end up joining the group?
So I also use the Meetup app, but I used to just go hang out in the board game ones. And then I was thinking, you know what, I miss D&D. The last time I played it was 15 years ago, and I was thinking, you know what, I want to get back into it. When I used Dungeons and Dragons as a search, I did find the group. And it was actually during the pandemic time when I found the group. So my first experience with you guys was on Discord, which was great. Yeah, because as a person with mild stranger danger anxiety, it was good to hear Jay's voice on the internet. And that guy sounded nice. I'd be okay meeting him in person eventually. And yeah, that's how I got in. I think that was around March or April.
Right. Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I mean, to segue smoothly into our opening bit of discussion topics, one of the things we always do for our venue choice in the physical world is we always make it somewhere that's public. So we tend to, at the moment, we're playing in a Pret a Manger is in a mall, but it's like right next to the MTR. That's like the metro, subway, the underground trains. And we like to have it be at ground level, the sort of place where you can see in before you come in. And I think the main reason for that, Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, is so that you can kind of you don't have to even commit to walking through the door and definitely being stuck there for a whole game session. We want people to be able to walk in, check us out, and like under no pressure decide that they don't fancy it and go away. Like I don't know. I mean, Bernard, what do you think about that? Is it your experience that the venue makes a difference to how approachable the group is?
Definitely, Tom. I would say so. So I think the first time I meet you guys is mostly, I think you are not around and Jay is in the Pratt. Like as you say, is very close to the metro, so the whole environment is very open. If you just feel like, okay, this is a group of weirdos that I really don't want to be approaching, you can go away. But of course, they are all pretty nice and cuddy, and I feel instantly at home already.
That's good. I mean, Jay, do you have anything to add about our sort of venue selection methods?
Yeah, it's there's some definite things that you don't want, and Tom's elucidated on why we particularly like our cafes, particularly cafes where you can clearly see in. Both the cafe in the Namfeng Center and the cafe in the Infinitus Plaza mean that they've got great big open glass windows and glass fronts and open fronts. So you are not committed at all socially, or even to playing the game until you actually approach us at the table and say hello. Yeah. Whereas there are many places in Hong Kong where if we were to say, do it in someone's room, you've got to commit to finding the room. You've got to commit to getting through the door guards. You've got to commit to alerting them to get them through the door guards. You've got to then come all the way up. You're then in someone's home. And then there's an introduction of privacy and introduction of relationship that goes all the way through that. There are quite a few strange little walk-up places in Hong Kong where you have to know the door code to get in. And it's a strange little dark lift that leads to a dark corridor, which leads to a dark room with some dark dice in them, with dark tables and people muttering around dark corners, and you think that's a bit too dark. Yeah. And the Prets we've got are light. So we like places where people can just sit down and come and go. One of our earlier locations was called Holly Brown, which was a lovely sit down, go order, come sit down. We left there when they became a table service restaurant, and that get a bit weird when you've got wait staff coming over asking if you want any more drinks when you've been there for the third hour.
Yes, yeah, that's true. It's I think one of the crucial things is that we do try and think about all the minor things that could put people off or that would make it more difficult. Because, for example, I think maybe if you're watching this, you might be thinking, what does it really matter if the venue is quite far away from a public transport hub or isn't in a well-known area? And no, it's not a big deal. But the thing is, every little deal that you get creates just like that might be the tipping point at which somebody decides they're not going to bother. It's too difficult or a bit too anxiety-inducing, or just too unfamiliar. One of the reasons we stick around the honestly quite pricey for coffees and sandwiches Central or Xiongwan area is that we do get people who are passing through like Hong Kong for just a couple of days, and they find us randomly on Meetup, and they wouldn't come. They're not going to get on the train and go for like half an hour into sort of an industrial or residential area. To be honest, even most Hong Kongers would probably balk at going down to going over to Sha Tin or something. So that I think is pretty important. It's also why we do one shots, I think, isn't it? Like, so you don't even have to commit to a second game. Although that brings us some challenges. Yeah,
it's about that kind of welcoming. I said, like Kat, you were saying that your first instance with the Discord. I mean, what was your first impression when you actually did get a chance to meet us in person?
I think that I think that it helps that we were in the Pret because I could see the players from afar. If I felt vaguely in danger, I could have just backed out and no consequences, I think. But also at the same time, I got to see what the group dynamic was from afar, and everybody seemed friendly. And knowing that I'm entering a one shot, like as you said, if it sucked, I don't have to come back, and I didn't commit to something, epically episodal like a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. One shot is just isolated to that one meeting. And my experience coming in, I think the first game I played in person with you guys was Microscope. And at first I was worried because my table, I was the only woman in the table, so I was worried about how that dynamic would play out. And Jay was such a great GM facilitator, I would say, for that one specific game, because he made sure that no one was talking on top of me, and I was given ample time to put in my input, and that really meant a lot, and that just made me think like, no, this is such a great group. I think I'll just keep coming back. It really just set the tone for the rest of my games, the weekends.
All right. Well, that's great to have such a vote of confidence, and also it's good to know that the theory pretty much works. I mean, Bernard, actually, you've been playing or attending. So is it 3.5 years? You said.
Yeah, 3.5 already.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you think are the? I kind of want to ask you about the way we advertise. I mean, we don't advertise in the sense of putting up Google ads saying "Come join our group," but we ended up using Facebook and Meetup, and basically nothing else except for the Discord switch due to the pandemic. I mean, do you think that's sort of the best option, or if not, why not?
Well, I would say that actually these are pretty smart options in that, as Kay said, so Meetup is some place that if people wants to find something new, they will at least give it a try, whatever the location they're in, what kind of meetup groups. And I think we explain ourselves pretty good. I think the explanation is, we are one shot, you can just come, and if you feel good, you come again. And then we set up a very good atmosphere. So as you guys said, I think that Pratt is a very good environment. I cannot recall one instance where we were bothered by the staff, things like that. So everybody can play in a very relaxed manner. So everything is nice. And then if the people don't use Meetup, well, there is quite a chance they will use Facebook. So I guess we already covered up everything. And for the new players, I think we always ask them, do you know about our Facebook group? We don't. And then we give them the link, and then they're in.
Yeah. I suppose I should explain. Yeah, I should explain the sort of 2-tier system a bit that we use, which is that Meetup is the official calendar. So RSVPs there are what count. You could say, I'll be showing up tomorrow on Facebook, but we don't consider it like an official attendance, like planned attendance, until it shows up on Meetup. And sometimes that means that another person will just add a +1 to account for it. If for whatever reason it's not practical for the person who wants to attend to do that. And that has become much more important recently, where typically in Hong Kong, certainly in our venue, we have a 4 people per table maximum, which means we're constantly trying to arrange games in multiples of 4, and 5 attendees is the absolute worst number to have. Because you can't split it into 2 games very easily, and that's why we do that. And then Facebook is where we discuss more things and suggest games. And actually, let's talk about that, the sort of the way we arrange things. And actually, Jay, you tend to be the call for games maven. Would you like to talk about how we?
Yes,
I
am the instigator of fun. The basic rule, the basic setup we've got is I'll add onto that term. We also do have the Discord. So it's kind of a little bit of a 3-layer thing. So we have a Meetup, we're just like publicly available. We have a Facebook, which is publicly noticeable, but we will filter who comes in. Then we've got a Discord as well, where we go, well, you've played with us a few times. Here's where we a little bit more under the hood. But the basic rule of it is, on a Tuesday, I try and find a slightly different way of saying, what do you want to play this weekend? Or who's got a game this weekend? Or, oh dear God, can I not GM this weekend? Or I've got a really good idea. I want to pitch it. Oh, there are some other people. Or didn't you say last week you wanted to play? Oh, no, you've got an idea this year. And just try and find some variation of the English of saying, like, who do you want to play a game today? We then have a broad discussion on the Discord or the Facebook where people pitch games. Some days we'll have a whole selection of people saying, oh, I want to do it. And Tom and I get to actually play games. Other times I'm there scratching my head on a Thursday morning going, I need to come up with something. I've got 8 people signed up already, which is normally when we go, that's 2 tables and microscope then. And on the Thursday, we basically advertise it. So the meetup changes from the banner that Kat drew for us into our specific image. The content of the game comes up, and that gets shared on our various channels, including personal Twitter accounts, to say, hey, we're playing this. Come along if you're interested, and please remember to sign up. And that's the basic flow that we've been doing quite well for the One Shot Saturday era of our meetup. It's settled into a decent routine.
Yeah, although I think I have a question for that, which is to Bernard and Kat, jump in the order you prefer. But how approachable do you find that call for games? Because I mean, I think it's quite important to me in a way. Personally, I was really proud and pleased the time when I think neither me nor Jay nor Stuart, who was still in Hong Kong at the time, none of us was there at the session, but it still went ahead anyway. That was the point I realized we weren't just someone's gaming group. So yeah, how do you guys do you feel like you're free to jump in with a game idea, or is it a bit intimidating? Do you let other people go first? How do you approach it? Maybe I should name someone instead of waiting for a volunteer. I'm going to say Kat.
Oh wait, so is this from the point of view of a GM or as a player signing up?
Oh, I think as a GM primarily, but that's a fair question. You could answer from either perspective. Yeah.
So I'm gonna admit that I actually didn't know the wide range of storylines, plot lines, origins of tabletop role-playing games. I only figured that out while playing with you guys. That's why I love the one-shot format, because I was playing sci-fi. I was playing a lot of, and my first time playing a Filipino role-playing game too with you,
Yes.
Tom. And I'm from the Philippines. I didn't realize that there were all of these different games and genres available. So that's what I loved about One Shot. It's a new flavor every week. And as a GM, I felt very comfortable just proposing something crazy and just putting it in and letting people try it out. So I think that it's very versatile. Like it's very easy for me. I don't feel a lot of pressure, like conforming to what people like. I just generally just run a game that I enjoy, and people just sign up, and that's nice.
That is good. Bernard, what about for you? And I suppose the other thing to talk about is what GMs need to prepare. Because the flip side of, well, let me do this question a different way. One of our kind of key things is that the players don't have to prepare anything. Like they don't even have to know that our group exists an hour before they show up sometimes. That has happened. Like people have just turned on the groups near you on Meetup and they've showed up.
For Japanese tourists, that was the weirdest
For
one.
example, yes, that was a good one. And so, I mean, Bernard, when you're prepping for when you've GM'd things, is it difficult to prepare all the like pre-generated characters or whatever, or to line up everything on behalf of other people?
Okay. Tom, I would say that actually one of the things that I really like about our group is the flexibility. In the sense that you can prepare a lot. Like you can think about your story over and over again for a month. You can prepare all those fancy pre-generated characters, and then you let people decide. Also, you can do it really simply. Just print out a couple of blank sheets, and then okay, let's do the character generation together. And I actually found that both of the scenarios are fun, in the sense that how ad hoc do you want things to be, or you prefer to be like in a more controlled manner? I suppose that for the first time GMing, you want a little bit more control. So I think when I do my first GMing, I will do all the pre-generated characters. I let people choose, so I will feel a little bit more safe. But on the other hand, I choose a system that I never played, so I have that bit of adventurous spirit. And I
Yeah.
think in the end it goes quite well, so everybody seems happy.
Yeah, oh, that's great. I mean, that has reminded me of an issue sometimes. Well, it's not a serious issue, but it's where someone who hasn't really played that much with the group wants to GM, which is great because you always need some more GMs. But they'll say things like, "Can people make their characters in advance if I post the adventures summary on Facebook?" Or I need people who know this game system or that, and we have to. Well, actually, Jay, how do we gently correct them as to as to the approach? Because you do have to be a bit careful with that, I think. You don't want to hurt people's feelings, you know.
It's more a case of leaning in and saying, okay, how can we help? So if someone's asking about pre-generated, like people creating their own characters, that means they're feeling a bit shy about imposing a character on someone, which is what you're doing when you're pre-generating. Now, obviously, there's the levels that you can pre-generate, but if you're playing classic D&D, it's an awful lot of the flavor options get tied into mechanical options. So when you're dealing out a set of characters, there's always that back of your mind going, well, maybe someone's not going to find something they'll like.
Yeah.
And that might put you on the back foot. And then again, with the teaching of the system, it's just like, oh, I want to run D&D 5e, but I need to make sure everyone already knows it. That's mostly about us saying it's okay. What else will be on the table will help. And it's that exactly is the thing we've got another little unwritten rule we've got. If you're first time GMing, generally either me or Tom or one of the regulars will be on the table with you. And one of the advice I tend to give to people GMing is GM something that you've already played. Or something that you've already played with us, so that when that happens, you can just sit down and you don't need to remember every rule, because I probably will. Or we'll just encourage you to go, okay, well, what makes sense in the story? So the way we kind of gently do that is rather than just saying no, we kind of say the classic thing is yes, and. So it's like, it's okay to do pre-generated characters. People will just deal with it. We've not ever had an occasion where someone's looked at a set of characters and gone, oh, but there's not any tiefling wizards.
I mean, that's bound to happen one day now that you've said it. But yeah, that's very true. I think people do identify with pre-gens a bit more quickly than most role players think they do. And also, when you sign up for a thing called One Shot Saturday, I think you at least subconsciously take into account the time constraints. We haven't mentioned our sessions are 3 hours long, and that is sometimes overrunning a bit, but usually not too much. So that's kind of the target time you have, and that means that you either have to bring pre-gens or character generation has to happen in like the first half an hour. So actually, we have a note here in the rundown about system complexity, and I think that is a thing. If you've got a system like Feng Shui, where you just pick an archetype and stick a name on it, more or less, that's one thing. If you were playing Rollmaster, no one's ever playing Rollmaster, but if you were playing something complex like that, then that's real pre-gen territory.
Yeah. So my experience of that is definitely like when you mentioned about with Feng Shui, sticking your name on the character sheet. That would almost be the number one advice. If you're going to do pre-gens for a one-shot, don't put a name on the character sheet.
Right.
And don't fill in too many of the cosmetic details, because I can see Cat nodding. It's one of the real hooks you can get a new player in. Is say, okay, so you're playing the Wookiee Scout, you're going to play the Gungan Ranger, and you're going to play the Jedi Counselor. You give them the mechanical information, you give them the maths, particularly when you're running D20 or 5e, where there's a lot of stuff that trickles in and flows out. But you let them give them a name, you let them give them a gen, let them give them an identity.
Exactly. Actually, Kat, do you want to jump in? Yeah, do you want to jump in on this, Kat, actually? Yeah.
Because I even remember my first Feng Shui character in Jay's game, and I loved it. Liberty Pharaoh, the detective.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for letting me make her. I didn't feel like I really felt like I was part of the character creation process. Give us the name, let us figure out how they look like, and we're good. We don't to roll everything else. We're fine.
Yeah. All right. Nice. I think that's pretty much covered the kind of selecting and arranging games part of our discussion. Let's talk now about what we actually do when we are at Pret a Manger and getting ready to play. I mean, I think the first thing we do, of course, is we show up and we try and grab tables for enough people to sit down, because you can't book a table at Pret. And we sit around and drink coffee and tea and eat sandwiches. But then the things get underway. Who wants to volunteer to describe how we arrange the games on site? I think it probably has to be Bernard or Jay. Maybe Jay, actually. And we'll come back to you in a second.
The tricky bit with it is, like you're saying, like put the coffee and the tea and the cakes and the things out. But I also make an effort to make sure that I also put, if I've got a rule book, I put it on display.
Dice bag
if
on the
I've got
table.
character sheets, I put it on display. I put the dice bag out. Because there's nothing more. I've had a few occasions when I've had my little one, who's now wandered off, with me, and I just look like a parent having a cup of tea or trying to feed a child. And people have kind of come in and gone, And I've actually got quite good at spotting people who are waiting for us, because there's just kind of a slight look around thing, but then who am I actually looking for? And because Tom and I have put our faces up on the various things, I have been noticed a few times. Oh, were you Jay? Yeah, yes. Yeah.
That's good.
Putting some stuff out is the main thing. And then it's a case of once everyone's kind of gathered in and we've got tables that hopefully aren't on opposite ends of the cafe, because that tends to end in yelling. We do it. It's mostly a case like we've had some really good events where we've had like 3 or 4 tables, all 3 tables grouped up together. I've actually had to do the full-on MC thing rather than just going, we've got one table, you're all here, going, okay, welcome everyone to One Shot Saturday.
That's right.
And then I invite the GMs who are there to pitch their games, if we've got multiple games, and then people rapidly rearrange themselves around on the tables. Well, sometimes they do that. Other times,
you say rapidly. I actually want. Yeah, I've got a bone to pick on that one. I think people tend to and ah and say, "Oh, I don't mind really." Do we have any tips for dealing with that? I think that's the number one time waster in drop-in RPG meetup arrangement.
Yes, Tom. I would say that someone needs to raise their hand and say that I'm joining this game, and I'm usually doing that role if I'm around, because I think that helps people to choose.
It does help people to choose. Yeah, so actually we're here saying we're doing tips for organizers, but actually this is a tip for players showing up to games. Just choose something and stick your hand up like Bernard. He's a prince amongst players in that regard. All right. I don't know what do we do then? Oh yeah, then we split up into tables. Usually maximum 6 in non-pandemic times, I would say anyway. And what do we do then?
Play.
Safety tools.
Mostly. Yeah, sit down and get on with it, which normally involves an introduction to the setting and a brief rundown of kind of what we're expecting, which will generally include safety tools. Yeah. Which is an important thing. At One Shot Saturday, we don't always use them. But what we will do is I certainly make an effort to say, when I've got my table, when I'm doing my pitch, say, so today's game is going to be comedic superheroes. Or today's game is going to be teenage drama. Today's game is going to be a sci-fi heist.
Right.
I let people know the relevant keywords so they can understand the genre and the genre expectations and the trope expectations. And that gets people on the right page. It gets them thinking about character names. It gets them thinking about what is expected for this. And if I know that if I'm doing something that's deliberately lighthearted, I'm pitching it lighthearted, I've set my body language up lighthearted, I don't tend to explicitly invoke a safety rule. But if we're doing something like Monster Hearts, if we're doing something like Microscope, if we're doing something like The Quiet Year, it's 2 Avery Alder games I've mentioned. If we're doing something like Fiasco, we will put a safety tool on the table.
Yeah, I think we generally go X card because it's very easy to explain, although it's not the only one. Obviously, we have Lines of Veils are an option. other safety tools are available.
Script change I've used
Script
a few
change.
times as well.
And the other thing I think I would mention, especially for a game like this, is actually, well, there are two aspects. One is to remember we are playing in a public place, so we would generally slightly discourage. Actually, no, we don't discourage horror that much. I've been running Vampire the Masquerade the last 2 sessions, but we sort of persuade people to keep it down a bit and think about people adjoining tables. You know, all of your players might be adults who are in for this, body horror or whatever, but the family with small children at the next table probably are not. And the other thing is, I think we do try and err on the side of excessive safety tools, because even something like classic D&D can have things in it that could be scary, might set you off a bit. It's got giant spiders in it; they're horrible. And you never know what's going to set you off. That's the other thing I always want to mention when we do the safety tools introduction, is that I know you might think this is unnecessary, but you just never know. So, and that's why we do it. And I am very willing to look like a loser who can't handle horror gaming or something. I'd much rather have that than have, for example, someone's first experience of RPGs be like really horrible in some way and make them. It's not even like that. I don't want to lose a potential player. I just don't want anyone to have a bad time. It sort of keeps me up at night, figuratively speaking. But actually, on the subject of safety tools, if you don't mind, actually, Bernard, I'll ask you from a GM perspective in a second. But Kat, because you were a sort of relative newcomer to this kind of open gaming, did you find that was something that was easily graspable and useful when you had that kind of introduction to a game?
Granted, I never had to use it during a game, but the fact that we had them made me feel okay to tell Jay that there are some scenarios that I'm not okay with, or if I have some anxieties regarding a plot line or the presence of something. It made me feel comfortable that there are people who would understand and would accommodate my needs. I think that's mostly what it is. You put the tools out so that these people are safe to play with. And I think it also, again, gives me more confidence that my needs are validated. It's fair that you have these feelings. It's fair that you have these boundaries. We will respect them. Which again builds that trust in me. I can keep coming back to this group. That's my experience with it.
Right.
Thank you very
Fantastic. Thanks. And Bernard, for you, what's your experience with, I suppose, the safety tools thing, but also with setting up genre expectation, like setting up expectations for the game, either from a player or GM perspective?
Yeah, Tom. So I think that is very important that everyone, as you said, needs to know in general where the direction of the story. Like the few times I GM, I want to make sure that, we are talking about war, we have battle, we have violence, or even something more dramatic. We need to make sure that everyone is aware and they are okay with it. Something like what Kay said, and you said that people have anxiety, they have things that they don't want to see in the table, so we err on the side of the caution. And I would say that generally it works well. Most people are okay with most things, but we never know. So yeah, you're right. So I think we are doing pretty well, and in general.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
I
think the other.
go
on. Sorry. Go on, Jay. Go on.
I think one of the things from a GM tip point of view is that when I've put out a safety tool, in particular, when I've used script change with Monster Hearts, I made a specific example. I went through and gave examples of where I, as the GM, would use the script change.
Right.
So I made it open. It's like, okay, I've got these safety tools. If you do this, if you put an excessive description of torture in, I'm going to tap the X card, or I'm going to ask you to fast forward past this bit, please, because I don't like that. I have a very pictorial imagination. I will be dwelling on this. Please move on. And in doing that, I give people permission. I'm not just saying, here's some tools. I also immediately use them.
Yeah, I think that also plays into a broader point that I hadn't really thought of till you mentioned it just now. But I think it's very important if you're a GM at this sort of event where, well, so again, sometimes it's new players or they are people who don't know you, that they're unfamiliar, they're in unfamiliar territory for whatever reason. It's important for you as the facilitator of a game or the GM or just the group organizers, like, we are, to be a bit vulnerable as well. I think that's one of the good things about sticking your rule books and dice on the table, right? Because there's that slight gamer DNA thing of being a bit embarrassed about being seen with role-playing paraphernalia in public, but you're doing that and people see that, oh, okay, you're not afraid of doing this game. Or similarly, you can talk about, as you say, your own safety tools and the way you might use them. And even things like doing a silly voice, right, or a potentially embarrassing voice for a character early on in the session can be a great way to show that you're not like too concerned about protecting yourself and that you're going to sort of push back in some way, some kind of controlling or arrogant way, which is often a fear of the strange GM, for someone coming into a game. Generally doing things that are a little bit embarrassing for you are good to make everyone feel comfortable. I think that's it's generally, I think, a good GM principle.
People are always a bit wary, and certainly anyone who's going to be looking at wanting to use a safety tool to keep themselves safe are always a little bit worried about the vulnerability. And one of the reasons I always do it whenever I put a safety card up, I give an example of when I would use it, is I want to say, I'm okay with sharing my vulnerability with this table.
Yeah.
And in opening myself up a little bit, I just make the table just a little bit. It's almost a safety tool in and of itself. It's like, I'm sharing a little bit. That means I trust you guys a little bit. And also in doing that, I'm demonstrating that I'm not going to come back. If you demonstrate the vulnerability or you want to use the safety tool, I am not going to come back at you with mindless locker room banter.
Yes, exactly.
I'm going to come back and say, if you tap the X card and then just walk away for a moment, I'm just going to ask everyone to go, okay, take 5 minutes. Let's everyone just have a quiet moment.
Yeah, that's very
and
true.
Then we'll come back
on that regard,
and carry
on. So I wanted to say actually that one of the things that I really enjoyed when we play is that nobody's so precious about the storyline. Sometimes you guys have instances where you're like, hold on, can I actually redo that entire scene? Can I go back on that story and do a different thing? And the fact that we are so generous with being imperfect with how we run a game makes us more comfortable to approach you guys to say, can we change something actually because I'm not comfortable? To show that we're not too precious and there's a generosity for messing up and being imperfect in a game is very heartening. And it also, how I tend to have the tendency to think, oh, but I want to swallow my discomfort so I don't ruin the experience for everyone. So it's nice that it's like, no, it's okay. We can retcon and go back. We can totally do that. So it makes me feel okay to use the safety tools in the future because we are allowed to retcon. We are allowed to change things, and the GMs are pretty chill about it. So that's nice.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. Thank you. Let's see. Let's move on to another bit. Well, actually, we have a couple of questions from people watching, which I think we'll come to that just after this bit because I think they're quite related. Let's talk about unexpected extra people showing up and its evil cousin, people not showing up. So, man, actually, let's let because I think once I let Jay off the leash on this, he might go for a while. So let's go to Bernard first.
Sure.
How do we deal with no shows? How do we deal with too many shows?
I think in general, I never read if we have an actual rule, is that I think you guys remember really well if someone is repeatedly not showing up. And I think if they do that, they will never show up, right? You would never, kind of like that, which, I mean, we didn't actually broadcast that, but I think that makes sense. I mean, commitment in a sense is that if you committed, you should at least show up. If you don't like what we're doing, it's fine, but you should show up. Well, the evil cousin is a little bit more tricky in that we did have that happen, well, more than a few occasions, right? I still remember the game with both of you. I think we have 8 players for that D&D first version game. I think
Oh yeah,
that's Tom is GMing.
yeah.
I mean that
That got out of
we all,
hand. Yeah.
yeah, we all try to be our best, but well, we all know how much time everybody have for themselves to express themselves. So I mean, yeah, this is not one of the greatest games we have, and then I think we try to kind of limit the number of persons that can join afterwards in Meetup, right? I think that's a
Yeah.
very good move by both of you. So I feel that the group is actually learning from experience. We actually experience that, and then we learn that is very good. That means we are moving forward. So I really like that, and I want to thank both of you, even though I
Oh
never
yeah,
said that.
thank you. But actually, that's a good point. Yeah, we didn't used to have a kind of upper limit, and so we would know we only had 2 games, and yet we would sort of allow the number to creep up. So nowadays we cap it at, well, under pandemic, 4 players per game, and previously I think up to 6 or 7, depending. We'd negotiate it a bit amongst ourselves. But yeah, Jay, what? Well, actually, here's a player tip. What is the acceptable time when it's okay to change your RSVP on Meetup? I would say up to an hour before, but even that is pretty bad.
We start at 1 p.m. Is the clock start. I have a soft rule of if you're not at the table by 1:15, then you're late, and I'm going to start. And I just get on with it because I'm not going to have everybody else wait if there's someone who may or may not to turn up. Yeah, we've had a couple games that got big. I had a game of Feng Shui where I had 8 players for a game of Feng Shui. There were 9 of us around this table, which was fine because a long thing table, we were doing a train game, so I just made them where they were sitting, where they were on the train.
Right.
So it worked out fine. But I had so many people turn up, I ran out of character sheets.
That's the problem, yeah.
I actually ran the character sheet, so I had to sit with someone while they got a bit of notepaper out and a pencil while they copied the character sheet off the rule book I had on my phone. Turning up late isn't too much of a problem. We can accommodate it. As long as you turn up. Oh no, I can do it. I've had a couple of people turn up late, but they've let us know. So I've always had it in the back of my mind, oh, I'm going to need to slide someone in here.
Yeah, you can slot someone into the story at some point. Yeah.
It's not too bad. But yeah, there's definitely an occasion where someone's just like not RSVP'd and they've shown up as like, okay, looks like we're trying this then. And it worked. Feng Shui can handle 8 players. I was able to keep the table moving, but it was all right. My personal limit is 3 or 4. Some game systems just don't handle large numbers. Some game systems don't handle big numbers. And with the pandemic, with the saying, look, we've only got 4 people at a table, everything comes down to multiples issues of 4.
Yeah, we've really had to shrink the caps there. And for no-shows, I think the issue with no-shows and overly large games is by the time by 1 p.m. it's too late for us to do anything about that. But you as the person replying on Meetup, especially if there's someone on the wait list, I cannot stress this enough. If you think you probably can't go tomorrow and it's like 9 p.m., just say no now, because that person is on the wait list. If you wait until tomorrow morning to change your mind, they are not even going to notice that they've suddenly got a seat at the game, and then they won't show up because they didn't know it was happening. And then, we'll be down to play. It's very annoying. And that's something we can control for a bit by, as you said, having sort of quite flexible setups. But it's not, that one's all on really the attendees. Okay, let's go talk. Oh man, okay, we've got a couple of questions about safety tools. So Bill writes, let's see, where can we get these safety tools? And a similar question from someone called Gruntlord, basically asking, is there a complete list somewhere? There actually is, I think, a list of safety tools. I think if you just Google the X card to begin with, is that the best place to?
X card by John Stravolopoulos has got one.
Yeah.
If you Golden Lasso Games have got a list of safety tools.
Yeah, actually,
on there, but they're not properly linked. There was a Yeah, let me just do some quick googling.
Okay, you do some googling you do some background googling, but I think yeah, like once you found one, such as script change and so on, you would normally find links around it to the others. They tend to be quite similar.
Yeah.
Oh, go on. You got it?
My Google is I can recommend the TTRPG Safety Toolkit by Kiana Shaw and Lauren Brian Monk. It includes a whole big pile of stuff by various people. With lots of different things and the methods we've mentioned and the rest of it. So go look at the TTRPG Safety Toolkit by Kiana Shaw and Lauren Bryant Monk. You will find a good selection of there.
All right. Yeah, excellent. So that kind of answers that question. Now we also have from Robert Dean. He says this was a question that was asked quite a while ago, but I've been hanging on to it. Sorry for keeping you waiting, Robert. Yeah, do you have standards to fill in with, such as microscope that was mentioned? So I think by this, Robert means old standbys that you have. The answer is absolutely yes, we do. I think I can run Cthulhu Dark without the rulebook and possibly specifically the scenario, The Secret of Castronegro, from memory. That's always one for me. Actually, I'm going to ask everyone. So even if you haven't had to bring a standby before, please let me know. Tell us what you would play as your instant game. Jay, I'll give the others time to think first. What's your classic standby?
If I've got too many players, I have used a couple of times as microscope, where I literally just sit in the middle, you do the introduction for both tables, and then of course they immediately start to diverge, and then they immediately get out of sync. So I'm not then I can just move between them. And after about an hour or so, I just sit there and look at my phone because they're gone and they're off. And I can
right, because that's a game that sort of explains itself, right? And you follow the instructions as you go.
It's a procedural GM game, so I just need to set the ball rolling. And once they've gone round once or twice, then they're off, and I just lean in to cause trouble or just eavesdrop and make jokes.
Yeah,
nice. We'll look after my network today. In terms of quick prep stuff, I've got the 200-word RPG Magical Girls Element Extreme Team Go is a fallback I use because it's only 200 words. And I've got it on my phone as a text document, and I can just go with something like that. Or any Lasers and Feelings hack.
Oh, yes. Good call. Yes.
You just need pencil, a note card, and the A4 printout, or even just on your phone, and you're just gone, and you're away. So those are my classic standbys, are the things that don't require me to have to print anything out.
Yeah, because of course Lasers and Feelings always has those randomly that generates the adventure by itself as well, doesn't it? Bernard, how about you? What's your kind of emergency game?
Tom, I would say that for me it's more D&D 5e. So I always have a couple of stories in my mind that I was developing, and then sometimes I take ideas from you guys, whatever games you're playing, and then I like this particular scenario, character, and other things, and then I would try to add that to my story. So if I need to do something like really short prep time, I would just throw in one of the stories in my mind, and let's see how it goes. Players usually they won't follow whatever you have in plans for them, and then it goes completely to a different track, and then I will pick a scenario from another of the games in my mind, throw at them, and then let's see what will happen. Usually something pretty interesting will happen, and then we will usually have a good time, and nobody realizes actually GM is having a quick mix in his brain just to figure out what to do next. Something like that.
Yeah, I always find the strategic tea break is good for that sort of situation. Everybody gets snacks while I think about what's happening. Kat, what about you? What do you think is a good emergency low prep game for filling in if you have, you need an extra table all of a sudden?
So I'm usually facilitating the backup table, and Microscope is the easiest one. If only because it is the first game I've ever played with your group, and as Jay mentioned, you should run games that we've played before, and that's a great rule of thumb. But if we were gonna go with a game that I am actually GMing, I actually play a stripped down my own variant stripped down version of Wander Home. Where I do the GMing just to cut time, and I I am very fond of cottage core comfort video games like Animal Crossing. So if I'm thinking of really cozy prompts like let's go fishing today, there's an insect catching tourney. I just basically go through my backlog of what are the really comfortable things we could do together as a group that's very low pressure. And I just take everybody, and I would prefer to take everybody into a cozy adventure. I haven't done it a second time, but the first time went great. So hopefully I'll get another chance.
Yeah, and that's great. And actually, you raise a good point. I think when you are called upon to run or facilitate something at short notice, not only something you've played before, but also something where you just know the genre really well. I think something that you read too much of when you were in your formative years, so that it's really easy for you to just pull out a trope or the next twist in the adventure is a good choice. So that explains my kind of film noir detectives obsession, I guess. And actually, we've got one more viewer question I'd like to do before we kind of return to the mainstream, which is from Crystal Morrison, and this is also table facilitation related. Do you ever have tables with too many people wanting to play one particular RPG and not enough players wanting to play another? Yes, that is a problem that we have. What do we do about that? Let's go back to Jay.
That is a complex one. Because you immediately run up against one of the metrics that Tom's using if you don't want people wandering away unhappy. I don't know. Have we had a...
I think we still... Go on,
sorry. I was going to say that although... Because I'm a regular, right? My rule of thumb has always been, if anybody is new, I hand them over to you or Jay. The people who are new, I allow them to take first dibs with more seasoned GMs. And as a GM, I rarely take in new people, also for my personal comfort as a GM, because I don't want their first experience to be with a newbie, essentially. And I'm more malleable in a sense that, you know what, everybody can take their first pick and I can just go in any other table. I think that we do have a handful of regulars who do come who are more flexible. So I think that's how we typically resolve it. Like it somehow organically does it on its own.
Yeah, I think you're right. We do see that kind of compromise, especially from the more experienced gamers. And sorry, Jay, you were about to say something, and I talked right.
Yeah, just literally that, and I think one of the reasons we just end up running unbalanced tables. We've not had that really happen in the pandemic era. No. It has happened a couple of times in the pre-pandemic era where we did have a lot of people. And we just ran unbalanced tables. We just let one table have more people and just let another table have another one. Particularly, I think we let one of our more novice GMs, it was Craig running Feng Shui, had more people wanted to play, had more people wanted to play D&DE than run with what I was running. So I just said, okay, that's fine. Yeah, if Craig's okay with it, have more players, and I'll just adapt and run something else. And we just ended up doing something different. You let the tables be unbalanced.
Yeah, I think so. One issue that's related, though, I think, is that as you mentioned, if you have a new GM, there are sort of two issues, both to do with being on the not enough table. One of those is you can feel a bit personally slighted, perhaps, if you're already unsure of yourself as a GM and you give your pitch, and then only one person wants to clearly. People won't say it out loud, but you can sort of see, I don't really fancy that. Now, personally, I don't have a problem with that because I tend to run weird niche games that I know very few people are that interested in anyway, like whatever that nonsensical Brazilian Wild West thing was I did the other week. Although that went okay. But there's that. And then there's also the issue that it's actually quite difficult to GM for just one or two people sometimes. Especially if you're new, you need a bit more interplay from the players occasionally. It's a bit more support. So in that case, I feel like if you're a sort of senior member of the group, you do want to kind of push people or volunteer yourself to go with the less experienced GM, I think. But as Robert Dean has mentioned, only a problem if the imbalance goes below the minimum needed for one table. Exactly. So if that happens, we kind of, as Jay mentioned, switch the game out to something that's enough people for, or we just get people. Yeah, we do get people to compromise. generally, we don't have strict rules about anything really in the group. It's a bit of an anarchist collective, and it sort of tends to sort itself out. It's not a huge problem, but it is something to be aware of especially from a psychological point of view, I think. Stephen Watkins asked, has this talk been recorded so it can be posted later? The answer to that, Stephen, is yes. Come right back to the URL that you are watching it at right now, and it will still be there. So you can skip back to the fun part at the beginning. No, it's all been fun. It's good. All right, so that I think is enough. That's all the viewer questions that are in for the moment. Let's quickly cover, I think, some of the secondary items that we have down here. New GMs we've talked about. Introducing new players. Actually, we haven't talked about that. We've mentioned new players quite a lot, but we haven't. I think one of our best bits is our by now ironclad method for sounding out new players. Let's see. Who wants to take this?
Well, you do your bit, and I'll compare it to mine because we've never been sat at the same table when we.
That's true. We tend to be greeting new players differently. All right. So normally, obviously, the first thing you do is say hi. What's your name? And have a seat. Yes, we're the gaming meetup. Oh, let's take that all as read. But
and I'm going to intercede that quickly. If you're a new GM or you're doing this, write the name down.
Good one. And then I tend to go through a bit of a checklist. So, have you played tabletop role-playing games before? And then, no. Have you seen it on YouTube? So, because the hard part to convey to someone who doesn't know about role-playing games is the mechanism of talking to each other. So I kind of do that. So, have you played it before? If yes, what kind of games have you played? That's just good to know as background info, but also it's just nice to make small talk. If they haven't, ask if they've seen it done or if they know how it works basically. And then if they do, you don't need to talk too much about what's going to happen next. But quite often, I mean, not often, but more often than you might expect, people show up having never seen, D&D on YouTube or not knowing anyone who plays it, as a friend or family member. And what I use is I think it's, is it Vincent Baker's role-playing is a conversation spiel? I go for that one. Role-playing is a conversation. One of us, the GM, will describe something that's happening in the world, and you will say what your character says or does, and then I'll tell you what happens after that, and then and we talk back and forth like that, and that's how the story happens. I tend to phrase it better than that. I guess I'm just feeling the pressure of being live on the internet, but yeah, that's generally what I do. And then after that, the newcomer will normally have more detailed questions about, then what happens if we can't decide what happens, and then I get to talk about rolling dice. But I find that little, do you know what we're doing? And what's your kind of experience level, and then doing the actual very basic spiel that's the method I've developed over 6 years. How about you, Jay? Yours is
similar.
I know yours is different. I have eavesdropped on yours a bit. I think it's different.
I have a tendency. I start with have you played a role-playing game before? And if they say yes, I immediately ask them, oh, what did you play recently? Invariably get the answer D&D many years ago.
Yes.
So I'll say, okay, fine, you've got a pretty good idea. And then what I'll normally do, because I very rarely GM D&D, is I'll introduce what's different about this game. And start talking about the genre. So if I'm running Feng Shui, I'll say, so, all right, today's game is going to be Feng Shui. This is a game based on Hong Kong action movies. Or today's game is going to be Star Wars D20. Do you know Star Wars? Right, then you're fine. So it's really easy for you just to get into the spiel, but it's definitely in the lines of, so role-playing game I use the phrase rather than conversation, I use the phrase collaborative storytelling. We're each going to take turns telling the story. You're going to play specific characters. I'm going to play the rules of physics and everybody else you might talk to. We talk until things get interesting. At the point things get interesting, then we roll dice to introduce risk and variability. And the chance of failure, because failure is just as interesting as success. So that's the usual spiel. I also start asking, when I got a bit of a hook on the genre, I start asking if you've seen any films or TV shows. Yeah. I like using, in my GMing style, with new players, describing cinematic tropes. So I tend to, when I do an interesting, I talk about the camera panning down to give people an idea of getting the theatre of mind. going?
Yeah, and
So what
actually,
would you
that's
see?
that's a good way to direct indecisive players as well. I find ask them what their favorite TV show is, and like that can help you to point them to one game or the other. Now, Kat and Bernard, you've both been subjected to this conversation at different times. Bernard, what do you remember about that? Of course, you would have played D&D before, if I remember correctly, but you would have been playing a different. I mean, 90% chance we played a different game that day. What would you have found maybe most useful, or is there something we should be saying, do you think, that we don't have in our standard repertoire?
Tom, I actually think that what you and Jay said are mostly appropriate in the way that you asked about people's experience, and you asked them what games they played recently. That makes sense. One little point that I don't always agree is the film or movie reference, because I found that on more than one occasion we found out that we are from different generations or completely different backgrounds, and then people will start rolling their eyes. I haven't heard of that, or I haven't heard of these, and then I would just say, yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's get moving on, and then you will know how to play when you start playing, and then
Yeah,
usually
that's
that will be fine.
that's a good point. I remember once being in a game with at one shot Saturday where for some reason the GM was stuck in a bit of a rut and kept describing things in terms of a mid 2000s anime that nobody else had seen, and he couldn't stop doing it, and we were just going, you're wasting your time. It was just lost on us. So yeah, that's something to watch out for. I mean, Kat, what about you? Any thoughts about ways to improve the intro, especially for people who just are not familiar with TTRPGs as a thing?
No, I just am reminded of when we played Firebrand, and I was trying to explain the concept of a mecha role playing genre to a person who has never watched anime. And I was like, Transformers? No, not that. And I just tried to list off every robot movie I knew. It was really hard. um but that aside, I remember my experience playing Microscope with Jay made it very clear. You play D&D, but this is completely different. This one is you're God. You're basically orchestrating a new history from start to finish. And he explained it it was so easy to understand the way Jay explained it. And fortunately also I work in a creative world building field, so that was easy to digest. I'm pretty sure if I needed more references, I could have asked him more questions, and he would have helped me out. But in general, I think that the way everybody does it, try to relate to the player with their experience or what they may have seen in media that exists. That's a very reliable rule of thumb, I think.
All right, thanks very much. Now, we are kind of at time, so I think, unless we've missed any really key topics that we wanted to discuss, I think we've covered most of our color-coded green on the rundown topics, so that should be fine. We've got one more very good question, in fact, from Reebok 390, the 390th of their name. How can someone host drop-in RPG meetups and not be a GM? There's a follow-up. Like, if someone wants to be involved in hosting but not want to run a game, how can they stay involved? Well, my initial reaction is that then you are giving yourself the additional task of recruiting someone to be the GM. But I guess that's not an insurmountable barrier, is it? Maybe let's get a Bernard first on this one. What do you think it's possible to only be a player and still be the organizer? Does it add any big problems, do you think?
I think it is doable, Tom, in the sense that you're really like an organizer, and then yeah, we want a GM, and then we want new players. But I'll be honest to say that because my main experience, at least initially, is with you guys. So, and you guys just always GM unless there is another one very willing to show up. So I'm kind of used to this scenario. And yeah, but I think that why not give it a try? Maybe it will turns out to be interesting. What do you think, Kate?
I think that why not just keep playing GM-less games is my question.
Well,
There are games
yeah.
where you don't need a GM, so you could just keep playing, games where you facilitate and you all share the burden of being creative and being imperfect as you try new things out, right? Yeah.
Yeah, solid answer. Jay, do you want to add anything there?
No, that's probably the best answer. It's just if you're committing to do that, it'd be weird if you were the host and literally just like the hostess, like everyone turned up and you didn't even play. That would be a bit strange.
Yeah.
But I can understand that it's like you want to set up a regular meetup, but you don't necessarily feel like you want to GM all the time. As Tom said, you have to do a bit of legwork to make sure you can get yourself a regular pool of GMs. And I completely second Kat's thing. Go for GM less or GM full games where you can just be a community at the table rather than having the usual slightly lopsided focus of a GM.
Yeah. All right. Well, fantastic. Thank you very much, all three of you, Bernard, Kat, and Jay, for joining me. I'm going to slap the banner up on the screen now to tell people where to find us. We're on Facebook, One Shot Saturdays with an S, because we didn't nail down the name for a while. Also, if you look on Meetup, we're on the calendar for the Hong Kong Tabletop Gaming Group, which actually has other events on it as well, but ours is the one that says One Shot Saturday on it, so you can come along and join us if you're in Hong Kong. And of course, if you're not, and if you've been affected by any of the issues in this broadcast, please feel free to. I think you can swing by Facebook and drop us a line there. That's probably the easiest thing. But
of course, feel free to comment on this YouTube video. We'll keep a bit of an eye on it to do any follow-ups, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Bernard, thank you. Kat, thank you. Jay, thank you. 6 years. That's crazy, isn't it? All right. So, and thank you very much for watching. And see you around. Oh, a couple more comments. Thank you from Jonathan Sands and Reebok again, and Chaz, who had to leave about 10 minutes ago, but a belated thank you from him as well. All right. Take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of Gen Con. Goodbye.